Welcome everybody at this workshop. This workshop, as many others that you might already participated in, are or is part of the Beta Europe Symposium. And by this, I really want to encourage your participation in the following workshop seminars, as I think this is a really an opportunity that I think we should all make a use of. So I'll kick this off by introducing myself, talking a bit about the Beta Europe think tank and what we do there, and then I'll move to the topic itself. So my name is Jakub, and I've been wrapping up my degree in European Studies, starting as an intern in a lobby group in Brussels from New Year's in January. And I've been involved in governmental bodies, educational institutions, so mostly policy work. And policy work is sometimes something that we are doing at Beta Think Tank, and it's a new team, and there we do a lot of things. So we function through the method of think tanking, meaning to research, cooperation, and policy development. We kind of try to improve the MEU side of Beta Europe. So anything that is remotely connected to MEUs, we deal with it. So financials, that's my thing, and that's what I've been working on for the past few months. And even though this workshop might have a clickbaity title, if you will, it sounds like a Kiyosaki's new book, Roadmap to Financial Success, but it is really just this very comprehensive guide to financing your MEU or any NGO conference for that matter. So even though we are focusing here on the MEU concept and how to organize one, we wanted to make sure that anybody from the third sector, the NGOs, can still benefit from the information that will be talked here. So let's start with some house rules. So we here at this presentation have two house rules. So the first one regards questions, and I distinguish between two types of questions. So the first one, I would call it red question, and that's something urgent. If you don't understand something or you feel like you wouldn't be able to follow the presentation from that point, just raise hand. We can have a quick discussion. I can clarify a few things. But since we have quite a tight schedule, I would say the green questions, the other type of questions, are something that is not urgent. You know, just write it down. We can talk about it at the end. There is a Q&A session, and me or Andrea would be very happy to answer your questions. And the second one regards time. We'll be finishing in an hour, so I'll try to make sure that I can convey the most important messages by 55 minutes now. So the first thing will be the topics that we'll cover today. So I imagine it always has this battle plan and you want to get to the finishing line, but before that you have to tackle a few things. So the first thing is budget. What is budget, how to make one, how to manage one. That's what we'll be talking about as the first item on the menu. Then we'll move towards funding. What are the funds? We'll kind of organize them. We'll look at funding opportunities, how to get them, when, so all the Why questions. And we'll kind of wrap this presentation up with a wrapping, so how to wrap up your conference. We'll talk about tips, how to kind of manage it, and what to do at the very end. So at the end of this presentation, you should be as skilled as Mr. Bernie here, not necessarily in terms of ideology, but especially in the knowledge of financial support. So let's start with the basics. And I start with the basics because this is something that you should always keep in mind. That's something you'll be talking about for months. So MEU, Model European Union, the word itself, model, means that it is just this simulation of European politics. And you can include here other keywords. You can include keywords like youth, policy development, policy, public speaking, participation. And all these keywords are very useful because it's something we'll be talking about throughout the whole presentation. But every single time you will be working with someone, either in terms of finances or partnerships, they will ask you, what is it that you do? And imagine yourself, stumbling across so many rocks. You don't know what you are talking about, and then you don't seem as a credible person. But using these keywords in your application, in your partnership letters, it will really make you look like someone who understands what is he or she doing. So now that we know what we are doing, we can move to the team setup. As any experienced MEU organizer would say, MEU is not a DIY project. You can't make it in one Sunday. You can't do it alone. It requires months of very careful preparation. And for this, you need to divide your team, or we recommend dividing your team into 4 groups. So the first team you should have is marketing and PR. These people will be responsible for management of the social media accounts, promotion and communication, but also for ads, since it's kind of closely tied with the social media. This team I would call is the digital team. Everything that is digital when it comes to communications is the responsibility of this team, and therefore they'll be talking about GDPR as well. We'll be talking about the responsibilities and how they approach them later on in this workshop. The second team is the logistics team. I call them the team on the ground because they really make sure that everything is being helped. They coordinate the participants on the ground. They are responsible for everything from goodie bags and gifts for speakers or kind of participants through catering and accommodation and venue management. So if there is a problem, these people are responsible, and therefore the budget should kind of cater them as well. The third thing is finance. So this team should be relatively small in comparison with, for example, content or the logistics team, 3 to 4 people max, and they'll be looking for funds in the months pre-conference. So let's say 6 months before the conference, they start looking for funds. They'll be drafting all the documents from applications to final reports, and they'll be also responsible for the budget general overview together with the G. And the last thing is, or the last team is the content team. So this team is always relatively large, and they select the proposals, and they are basically the European Commission for the MEU. So they safeguard the rules. They make sure that the educational outcomes will be delivered in the highest standard possible. So the first thing on the menu today is budget. And you don't have to be a business major to understand or imagine what budget is. But I would say budget is a financial plan. A nice parallel to this is, imagine that you are constantly adding up numbers, and you have 10 plus 5 plus 5, and then you are at the 30th number, and then you start subtracting. And at one point, you just lose count. You don't know where you started, what were the numbers, etc., etc. And this might happen to your MEU if you don't really keep your numbers under control, I would say. And some unexpected expenses might kind of leak through the cracks, and then you are in a huge problem because you ran over your budget. And NGOs are not really well known for making money. So here you have to understand that if you run over, you're done. There are no money, and that's a big no. We don't want to go there. So the second thing you should do when it comes to budgeting is to do 2 things simultaneously. The first one is legal check. Every single time when you are making a conference, we recommend you create a new banking account. And here, various national branches might have their regular banking account in which they, if they organize events, workshops monthly, and they have a regular cash flow, then it's of course, it's really nice to have one. But for a conference, let's say MEU Spain 2020, you should create a different account. And after that conference is done, you close it and you create another one next year. Here it's really important to highlight, because it happened in the past. Don't forget to ask your national banking authorities if you can open a banking account and what do you need for that. Because sometimes people, Beta Europe national branches, people come from different backgrounds, different countries, and sometimes they offer a banking account in a different country, and that's not really what we want to do here. And the last thing is authorization. So if you are having a banking account, make sure that the DG is responsible for the authorization. He can or she can withdraw money, put the money on the banking account, but you should always have 1 more or 2 more people that can do that as well, in case the DG is kind of messing out. And the last thing is the budgeting tool. So for the budgeting tool, we've developed a tool which is really simple, quite straightforward. It's the backbone of any budgeting tool, basically. And sorry, I missed the feedback section, so I'll quickly come back. So in the feedback section, you should ask your previous DG for the kind of, I would say, budget from last year. And in case he or she gives you access to this budget, you should review it, because then you have relatively little to do. You just change your numbers, you just change the items, and that's it. But that person might not be very willing to give you access to this budget. So you have to create one yourself, but then you should always ask, what is it that I can improve? What went wrong, etc., etc. So this feedback from the previous generation, I would say, is quite important. Now to the budgeting tool. And as the gentleman says, we should really make sure that we use Excel for that. I'm not sure if this is working because I'm screen sharing. So I'll try to move to the budgeting tool. And if you could tell me if it's working, that would be great. Can you see the budgeting tool now? No? Okay. Let's see what we can do.
We still see the Excel guy.
Is it better?
Yes.
Right. I'll be quite quick here. So as you can see, there are various tabs that you can add, you can delete. We'll provide this for you in case you really want to organize your own MEU for the first time. And as you can see here, this is the projected. So this is something that you expect to happen. It's very different, trust me, from the actual one, vastly different. So first thing is income. As you can see, 3 elements. We'll be talking about each one of them later on. If it's paid, then you click paid and it's done. You don't have to pay attention to that anymore. On the right-hand side, you see the individual calculation. So you see how many participants, what is the individual fee, and that's quite important for example, the marketing team. So when they see, we have 50 participants, how should we target them? What is the group of people, etc., etc. And then we go to expenditure, and this list is, arguably very long, much longer than the income, unfortunately. And participants accommodation, chairs accommodation, quite easy, quite straightforward. Here, I would like to highlight for anybody who is organizing his first MEU or her first MEU, chairs accommodation, very important topic, and a lot of people forget about it. But the MEU project is, you can't do it without the chairs. Therefore, you should really cater to them and make sure they can come. Meaning you pay for their accommodation, you pay for their tickets, you pay for them being there because they are the safeguards of the rules, if you will. And then moving to the processing fees that might not apply to your country. Digital, this is the first thing that we've talked about. So anything that is, in the digital sphere, meaning websites and ads, here it is. So they can, edit, delete, whatever they need, it's here. Then socials, catering, that's the second thing. So anything that needs to be changed here goes here, and you have a very nice overview. So the first one is cost, paid, and remaining in the third place. And then we move to the actual tab. And here you can see that we did an example. So you see how it really works. Once you change something, it's quite automated. So all you do, it's Excel. And then we prepared some projected fee breakdown. So you can see, you can visualize, you can talk about it, you can put it on your website. I mean, this is not a very good example as everything is 10%, but that's what we did. And now I'll go to the PowerPoint. So as you could have seen, there needs to be some balance between the income and expenditure. And as Boromir would say, it's in your hands. It will not do it itself. You have to put some work. And that means we have to talk about income because you need money to, organize your conference. So there are 3 elements of an income: participation fee, accommodation fee, and sponsorships or donations. So first we'll take the participation fee. So what does it mean? What is the participation fee? What does it include? Well, first of all, participation fee, as the name already implies, it's something that participants pay for their attendance. They have access to the conference and workshops. It covers also the conference materials, meaning, it depends on your management or on your MEU. So you can provide them with pen and paper. That's always very helpful. But you can also provide them with printed guides. You can provide them with various materials. And then at the end of the conference, they are eligible for a certificate. And this certificate needs to have some quality, some rules. So the general rule of thumb is that participants shouldn't miss more than 80% of the conference. I mean, it can happen that, well, you are indisposable or incapable to join, then it's fine. You can miss 1 day, for example, but you shouldn't miss more than that. And at the very end, by paying the participation fee, participants can get all the catering they want. So meaning lunch, breakfast, dinner, whatever it includes, and also socials. Here, I would like to highlight that this is what we are operating in. So it's from 0 to 100. When we are talking about the price or the hired fee, we should be really careful to make sure that it's not over 100. An example of this is MEU Yash. So the first conference there was 10 euros, 10 euros participation fee, quite easy. Last year, I think it was 25 euros, but it should never exceed 100 euros because that's a very big problem for any MEU. It basically renders your possibilities to attracting people, and we'll be talking about it later on. The second one is accommodation fee. So here it's quite important to highlight that for anybody who is organizing his or her first MEU, it's not a necessity. You don't have to provide accommodation for participants, but it's highly recommended. It's very nice. It takes a lot of pressure from participants' head, if you will. So here you should always look for value and the best value and price ratio, meaning, cater to your participants. You are not going to host a top-notch research symposium or conference. It's university students. They don't have to stay in 5-star hotels with jacuzzi and everything. They can stay in hostels. Everybody can take a few nights in a hostel, but here again, the same thing. Imagine you paid 100 euros for an accommodation fee and you end up sharing the room with 8 people, 10 people. Well, that's not really what we want to achieve here. So make sure that you always choose the best value and price ratio in terms, in your terms, so you can save money, but also in terms of the participants. Make sure that they have some privacy, they pay adequately, if possible. And then we prepared some tips for you. So the first tip applies to the countries of the post-Soviet bloc, and it's universities. Universities often administer or manage dormitories for students, especially in the Eastern countries. And if the DG is from a university, it's quite easy and accessible to just ask the school if they can provide an accommodation, depending on the quality of it, of course. But it's I think that's a great tip. Second is hostels. That's mainly for the Western sphere. As we all know how the traveling sector, the hostels are struggling with just being afloat, surviving. So I think anybody will give you a very sweet discount if you can promise them you'll keep them busy for a week or so. And that brings us to the main problem. So I've prepared a little breakdown of how an MEU can get really expensive. So participation fee is 50 euros. So that's an example, of course. All of these are only examples. At the end of the day, if you pay all the fees, because you pay participation fee and accommodation fee to the organizer as a participant, then you also have to pay your travel expenses. Imagine you are traveling, across Europe, and 100 euros, that's a very small amount. That's basically a flight, I don't know, 2-hour flight. But imagine you are going, for example, to Strasbourg. Very expensive. It can get as expensive as 300 euros. And then you always have to pay for your meals because we all know that it's happening, although it's a very unpopular opinion. The catering is often not enough. You might have a special diet or you're just hungry. And then, it's 300 euros, you don't even know how. And 300 euros, well, I don't know what kind of student, because students are usually the participants, have 300 euros just laying around for a week. I mean, in some countries, it's literally 2 weeks of 2 months of living expenses. So it's really important that you push the price as low as possible. And that brings us to how to make sure that you can bring this price down as much as possible. So we'll talk about grants and private donations. So this is the attitude you should have. We'll get all the grants for all things. So you have a lot of grants, you have all the money you need. And that brings us to where should we look for grants as MEU organizers? Is there something in the chat? Yes.
Yes, it was me. I basically just outlined that on the travel expenses as Vita Europe, we have a sort of agreement with Flixbus. We can offer 10% discounts. It's not that much, but especially for Strasbourg, it's really easily reachable by bus, not so much by plane. So you can contact us prior to your MEU, and we can give you some discount codes also to pass on to the participants.
That was a very nice ad slot. So yes, don't forget Flixbus. we can provide you with codes. Yeah. So now to continue, when it comes to grants, the first question is where should we look at? So the first area where we should look at is regional development agencies. Every European country has one. So you should contact them because they can provide you a lot of information, various sources. They can invite you to various projects. It's very helpful. And at the end of the day, it functions mostly on call for proposals kind of thing. So it's not that they have grant prepared, but they often very much post something that you can apply for. And the second group is annual grants that get renewed annually or for a period when it comes to the European Union. So the first one is something we'll be looking into today. It's Erasmus+. And then we have NATO, Council of Europe, Europe for Citizens, European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, and Visegrad. I'll be talking about them briefly in the next slide. So I've divided them into two groups. The first one is default group, which means if you're organizing an MEU, this is your default grant. This is the grant you go to because you are eligible for it already by making MEU or creating MEU. The first one is Erasmus. We'll cover it later on. Visegrad, you are eligible for it only if it's geographically restricted. So if you come from Visegrad countries, you are eligible for this grant and you should apply. When it comes to Council of Europe, you are eligible anybody from observing countries, member countries, but this grant is quite small in comparison to, for example, the Erasmus grant, meaning it gets disbursed quite quickly. Everybody wants their piece of the pie. And then the thematic. So these are quite tricky because for these grants, you really have to make sure that you have a legislative proposal, for example, that is tied to NATO. That's something MEU Spain 2020 wanted to do. So they wanted to simulate the whole NATO procedure. They have chosen the legislative procedure featuring NATO. And for this, they were eligible to get the grant. When it comes to the instruments, is there a question? Or just a raise hands?
The sound is whenever someone joins or leaves the
call. Sorry, yeah, I haven't heard that for a while, I forgot. I was talking about the instrument. So again, if you feature something that is closely tied, for example, to human rights, you are eligible for this fund. Europe for Citizens, the same. It's about dialogue and participation. So if you include something like this, yes, go for it. So now that, as I said before, we arrived to the Erasmus+. So we'll explore the options. I'll explain what is it about. And this is the core of the presentation because this is the grant you should go to by default. So the Erasmus Plus grant is operating under the key action 3. If you're ever going to look it up, just write into Google Erasmus Plus KA3, you are there. And we'll be focusing on youth dialogue projects. We'll talk about objectives, requirements, the role of national agency, and I'll provide you with a step-by-step guide. So first here, I'll explain what is the Youth Dialogue Project. It's basically any event that is organized by an organization, an NGO for that matter, that kind of encourages people to participate in public life. And now when it comes to the objectives, so as I said, participation of young people in democratic life, but what are the intermediary goals? Because that's the ultimate goal that we want to reach by 2027, for example. The EU adopted its EU youth strategy, meaning that these are the intermediary goals. It's 11 of them. So if you are from a different sector, for example, you are organizing a different conference, you should check them out and align your activities to that goal. But I've selected 3 goals that are closely tied to the MEU concept. So the first one is connecting EU with youth. The second one is quality learning. And the third one is youth organizations and European programs. And we'll be talking about what it encompasses in the later stages. So these 3 goals are closely tied to 3 words. It's engage, connect, and empower. And if you think about the definition of an MEU, this is what MEU means. You connect people, you empower them, you give them some skills. And this is, well, it's a reference from, or it's a quote from the program guide of Erasmus. And, it supports any event simulating the functioning of the democratic institutions and the roles of decision makers within these institutions. So MEU as a concept is perfectly eligible for funding under the Erasmus Plus grant. And that brings us to requirements. What are the requirements for a new MEU to kind of get the funding? So the first one is eligibility. We know that we are an NGO, which makes us perfectly eligible. Then it comes to the participants. All participants need to be between 13 and 30. For MEUs, everybody has to be over 18, but that's for a different presentation, I guess. And here it's because it's a youth project and EU defines young people as everybody under 30, even though you might not feel like it. And then this project needs to feature non-formal learning principles and practices. Again, meaning what is non-formal learning principle? It's practice-based, meaning MEU is practice-based because you simulate, you kind of talk about things, it's public speaking, and these are all practice-based. Then it brings us again to the participants, minimum number is 30. So this number 30 is already like included with your management team, organizing team, but also participants. For the sake of best MEU you can provide, you should always strive for the highest number of participants, let's say 50, because then it makes sense to have also journalists and you have your parliament full of people. Then duration, any project under Erasmus Plus needs to be between 3 to 24 months, which, as I said before, it takes months to prepare a one-week conference. So your project starts much earlier. And then I included two things that are quite interesting, and you should not forget to put it in your annex for your grant application. So the first one is timetable, and this is something I've never seen before. You should annex your timetable of proposed activities one by one when you are applying. And the second thing is a declaration of honor, quite a basic thing, but here I want to show you how easy it is or accessible are all the documents that the EU uses. So it's like, this is the honor, the declaration of honor. And you can really see that everything is in brackets, everything's quite easy, everything's explained, and you can find everything online. So when it comes to the digitalization and kind of access to these documents, quite easy, quite accessible. Now we move towards the role of the national agency. We'll talk about it also later on, but here I want to mention that the national agency, meaning it is in every country, all member states have one, or even more, depending on the size. So they select projects to be funded, meaning you should always contact them for all the information. They can provide you with so much. And that's something I would call a lobby. So if you make a relationship, if you create a really nice relationship with this national agency, you can make sure that your grant might be accepted. It monitors and evaluates the Erasmus Plus grant, and it supports applicants and participants, as I said. Here, it's quite important to highlight that it happened in the past. The application should be submitted by the organization, meaning your beta national branch, not by the DG himself, although he's probably the one signing all the documents. And now we are moving towards what should I aim for when I'm writing a grant proposal. So there are 6 objectives that you should aim for. So the first one is the objectives of the grant itself. You should align your activities, whatever you want to do in your week, in your MEU conference, to the objectives of the grant. So for example, one of the objectives of the grant is to make sure that people with fewer possibilities to participate can actually participate. And you can quite easily include that, through these proposed activities, you want to make sure that you can include people with these fewer possibilities, or by having a low price, you can make sure that people will participate. The second one is high quality outcomes. When organizing an MEU, you should make sure that you know how to quantify your learning outcomes. So for example, when it comes to public speaking, how do you want to make sure that people will learn or improve in public speaking? And you should strive to make sure that all your educational outcomes are of high standard. The next one is relevant decision makers, meaning it's also written in the program guide. They will look into whether you include decision makers into your conference. So for example, imagine you are talking about environment and you want to invite someone. Well, you should make sure that you invite someone, for example, from the national agency or an MEP that is involved in environmental matters, because that will boost your credibility. Then consistency. What does it mean, consistency? Well, it basically means that all your activities are closely tied to the objectives. So for example, again, if you are talking about environment and your whole conference is about environmental issues, I see very little sense in organizing a workshop on the rule of law, for example. So that's consistency. Then comes the quality of project design, again, closely tied to all of the objectives. How, of what quality is your project? Is everything closely tied together? How well thought through is your project? How the activities align to each other, etc., etc. And the last thing is impact and dissemination. So dissemination might not apply, dissemination of results basically, and this might not apply for MEU per se, but it might apply to other NGO conferences. When it comes to impact, it basically asks, what is the impact you make onto your participants, but also the outer sphere. So not only your participants or your management organizing team, but all the stakeholders around. And here I would like to highlight one thing, meaning I have to move this second. And I would like to highlight that the whole project consists of 100 points. It's basically like a test. You need to attain at least 60 points to be eligible for funding. And here the rule of 15, 15, 20 applies. And that means that 15 points is for relevance. So how relevant are your activities, is your project to the objectives? 15 points is for impact, meaning, again, how relevant is your impact or how big is your impact? And then 20 points out of 40 is for the project design. So of what quality it is, and if it meets certain standards. Then we can move to step-by-step guide. So this is quite simple and quite straightforward. The first thing you should do as an MEU organizer is to register your organization. If it has not been registered yet by the previous DG at this portal, it's called EU Login. And you'll get, it's called PIC, P-I-C, and it's participant identification code. That will allow you to log into this portal, the EU portal for grants, especially for Erasmus Plus, of course. And here you will have to upload all your documents. What does it mean, all your documents? Well, everything the EU requests. So if it's a declaration of owner, you will include that. If it's the proposal itself, you will include that. And what is great here is that it will not allow you to continue unless you upload all the documents. Then you need to do your compliance check, but with that, something we've already done. We've talked about the requirements and the eligibility basically. Then you submit your application. There is a deadline for Erasmus Plus. There are 3 deadlines in a year, and then you will, in 4 months, but there is a chart in the next slide, you'll see whether your grant was awarded or denied, meaning that you get the money or not. And here it's quite important to highlight, I think, the principle and concept of the Erasmus Plus grant. The Erasmus Plus grant is based on co-financing. So you have to prove in your grant application that you will not get the money if you say, well, if I don't get Erasmus Plus, I can't really make it. At the same time, you should always make sure that you say, if I don't get the Erasmus Plus, I can't make it, but I also have other sources of income. I have the participation fee, I have the accommodation fee, I have sponsors, I have MEPs, a lot of stakeholders. And then it comes to the financing itself, and I'll explain that on the next slide. So on the left side, you see the dates. So 4 times after you submitted your proposal, you will hear from the, well, I would say commission, but the national agency, whether you've been awarded the grant and how do you want to, go on about it. And then we'll kind of skip these 3 because that's something that is closely tied to the last one. And the percentage of grant provided at different stages, meaning that there is only one stage, and that's pre-financing and balance payment. So if you apply for a grant, you're awarded the grant, you get 80% of the requested amount beforehand. So meaning before your final report. So you get the money before the conference, for example. It might happen if you get it. At the end, after the conference is done, you write a final report and you'll get the balance payment. For example, this is applicable for travel expenses. So that's something MEU Brussels did, I think, last year, when they couldn't get last 20% unless everybody from the participants gave them, for example, the receipt from their flight. They can get the balance payment, they can get the money back. And it's, as the third part of the chart says, it's done within 60 days, calendar days from the final report. And this brings me to, what about the other grants? What about the other grants that I've mentioned? And basically, they all function on the same basis. Some of them might have interim report. That's something that you do in the middle of your conference, of your project, in which you kind of elaborate on how it is going. It's very technical, of course, sometimes. And at the end, there is a final report. All these grants, all these possibilities function basically on the same model. You talk to a national agency, to a national body, or, for example, in the Council of Europe, you talk directly to the Council of Europe. And then it brings us to the last topic. It's the private donations. And it's mostly individuals, businesses, or foundations. So nothing related to the huge international bodies. So as I said before, we'll talk about individuals, mostly MEPs, or other these smaller institutions. So when we talk about how to get them, you should make sure that you start at least 10 months before your conference. You contact the closest Europe Direct Information Center because they can provide you with a lot of information about various things. So when it comes, for example, for grants, it's your guidance, basically. They will guide you through the whole process. They will give you information. You can ask them, hello, I would like to apply for this grant. What do you think should I do? And you are already creating this relationship. You're already lobbying for it, at least partially. But they can also provide you with a list of stakeholders. They can provide you with the list of various decision makers that you should contact. And that is closely linked to what you should do 5 months before. You should get the patronage of EU institutions. And the first question is probably, what is the patronage? Well, the EU Parliament defines it as a moral support, meaning that you won't get any money, but they can provide you with credibility. And that's what counts probably when it comes to MEUs or conferences of NGOs in general. So you basically get a stamp saying this is something that has a clear European dimension, and the European Parliament or Mr. Sassoli or other institutions approve this. So that's a huge step. 4 months before, you should contact your MEPs and their offices either in the member state or at Brussels, and they can provide you with funds. They can be your speakers. They can provide you, again, with a list of stakeholders. They can give you tips, a lot of things. And after the event, here I would like to mention that you should always provide them, when writing a letter, a short brochure about your event, about MEU. So what is an MEU? How do you want to, for example, if they are providing you with money? So what are you going to do with their money, or ask for support? What is it going to be about? What topics are you going to talk about? And after event, you should write a report to all of them saying, this is what we did, this is how it went, this is how many participants we had, etc., etc. Now we come to the business side. So this is quite simple and quite straightforward, since MEUs are of, well, less professional in smaller setting. You should always go local. So, local companies have always a higher stake. It's how the community performs and what they do. So you should try to gather funds from the local companies, local restaurants, local businesses, because then, it's a trade. What can you provide for them? You will not get anything, and I'm quite sure of it, if you say, well, I want your money, but you get nothing in return. But if you can say, well, you can put an ad, for example, in our conference, or you can give us something and we'll be using it. So it's creating a brand awareness. And you should also establish a relationship with them, meaning you should have a point of contact. If your relatives work somewhere, they know the management, it's more easy to get these funds if you have an insider, basically. And the last thing on the menu today is foundations. Of course, when it comes to getting money. And here it's quite similar to everything that we've talked about. Foundations are very specific, only in the field of how they call for proposals. So while, for example, Erasmus grant is annual thing, it renews every year. You can get the funds basically every single year. Foundations work on a call for proposals, basically. So if they propose a call, or if they call for a project, you should apply, you should monitor it quite closely. So it's hard to provide any information now that would be applicable in general. And now project management, how you should manage your project, what you should do at the end, and how to wrap up your conference. So we've prepared some tips. The first is priority list. If you are organizing a conference, if you are organizing an MEU, always three things. What is absolutely critical for an MEU? So let's make an example. You need, for example, an interactive board, or you need a laptop. So that's something critical, and if you don't have it, you can't function. What is quite important? Well, quite important is to have, I don't know, certain writing tools. And what is nice to have? Well, nice to have is some very, very nice social, or maybe a band playing. That's nice to have, but it's not crucial for your success. That's not crucial for the conference itself. And then we can talk kind of three things as well. Vendors quotes. If you are buying something, don't just jump for the first offer you see. Try to get as many quotes, as many offers as possible, so you can choose quite wisely, I would say. What do you want? Is it something you need? And how much do I want to pay for this item? The third thing on the list is digitalization of an MEU or any conference. So you should always try to go as much digital as possible, meaning don't print the guides. Nobody will ever read a printed guide. Put it on Google Drive and make sure that all your participants have access to it, meaning you can save tens to hundreds of euros if you are not going to print anything at all. That's a huge advantage of going digital. And then contingency. And that's basically your overhead. How much can you go over the budget and still be relatively safe? And in the rule of thumb in general, it's 10 to 20%. So if you have, I don't know, 100 euros budget, then you should make always 10, 20 euros about, for example, damages. Someone might break something, a window might crack, and your venue will say, well, you have to pay for it. And if you don't have this contingency, if you don't have the safe space to operate in, you go bust, you don't have the money. And the last thing we'll cover today is how to wrap up your conference. And this is quite general, but I think it's still worth going over it. So the first thing you should do is review budget. That's something you should do on an annual basis for your national branch, meaning you review it, what went wrong, what could we improve, where could we get more funds next time. Then you should pay all your outstanding orders. For example, if you are still, for example, last day of the conference and you still have catering, and they will send you the receipt, and then you should pay it. You should make sure that everything is paid before you close the banking account, and you should make sure that there is zero at the end. As you started the same way you should end. You should gather feedback on the budget, on your financials. You should make a group meeting, and in which from all the teams, there will be someone and they can talk to you, meaning we didn't have any money left for the last night catering. That's a problem, and you should maybe improve it for the next year. And then you should write reports. A report meaning final report for the Erasmus grant if you get it, or other grants, and reports also for your stakeholders. And that will be probably the end. And thank you for your attention. And in case you have questions, I'm here to answer any that might arise. Yes. Anis?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jakub, for the presentation. Well, I've got a few questions here, and I want to comment on something that probably I don't agree with. I will start with this regarding, for example, the age. I don't think that the age should be from 30 until 30, because this is something that I really don't like in MEU. Because what do people that are aged between 13 and 18 or 19 years old, so know about European politics or know about that? I mean, psychologically, it's not good for them. They don't have any background. They will make a lot of problems in the conference, and there will be a big issue between those that graduated or that are graduate, or they have any knowledge about that, and those that are high school participants. I think that if this was in the regulation or in the proposal, I would amend it. So I myself, because I suggest, as we are going to beta 25, to have the age from 19 at least to 35. So we need to extend the age, because I think that the best participants of MEU are from 20 years old and more. These are the participants that I really enjoyed MEU with them. I hope that this is helpful. The other one, talking about the sponsorship. Um, is there a possibility, for example, to do like some NGOs and some projects and some organizations that I collaborate with? It's like they reimburse the money to participants. So I think that this is another type of organizing. So MEU is like looking for sponsors for different funds. And of course, after they pay, we reimburse them the money. So I think that MEU like that will get more successful and very useful. Because when I collaborate with IATA, for example, so this is one of the tips that we follow. Of course, we are talking about the conference materials, we're talking about catering, a lot of things. Also, you mentioned that the travel expenses, it's like 100 euros. I don't think that 100 euros are travel expenses for the flight and everything. They are really expensive. For example, if you fly from Paris to Warsaw, it's at least 250 euros. Yeah. I think, what do you think, guys, about, for example, having like an agreement with um, with airlines in Europe, for example, Air France, I don't know, Lufthansa, so they can just Wizz Air, for example, they can sponsor the trips of participants, and I think that this is a good point, for example. The other one, for example, talking about accommodation, university, and hostels. I think that this is one of the best points for MEU, just to sign an agreement with universities. So participants go straight away to hostels, to those maybe student campus or something like that. It will be very comfortable, very easy. The security is there, and yeah. Or for example, there should be something, for example, related to European politics. For example, um, security administration, so in that country or something like that. I think that they can sponsor that. Military departments. I think that there are always solutions to avoid the problem of money from participants, because it's really expensive like that, and people think that MEU has become a business, not something that they can benefit from. Yes, as you mentioned, the very good points like Me Too, Erasmus Plus. Yeah, I really like that. The last point that I want to comment on, yes, cooperation with airlines is a lovely idea. Yeah, thank you so much, Christine. I hope that I could help you a lot. Yeah, let me please comment on the 60 points, as it's very interesting. How to get them, where to apply for them, and who gives these 60 points. Is it like very necessary to do that? Personally, I haven't thought that MEU or organizing MEU is difficult like that, because I think that it's easy to organize it. So while regarding my experience in organizing. But like this is a little bit complicated. Well, if you need my opinion, so I can help you with what I can. The last question, does the organizing team in some MEUs get recompensed or rewarded from the budgets? So that means that does the organizing team get like some money from that money which is collected or gathered? I think that some MEUs are organized just by gathering money from participants, then they do that. This is one of the easiest points just to do it. Yeah, I hope that I commented on very brief, interesting points. And I really would like MEU to be reimbursed and to change the age, please, to have not until 30, but until 35. Because from 20 or from 23 and more than 30, really there are very, very good participants. So you will be very rich like that because it is going to get developed and improved. And I don't want you to have the same traditions, like routine. So every year, and it's like that. So for me, so I would like to have it like that. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for the feedback, and I'll try to answer as much as possible in the shortest possible time. Could you please repeat what was the second topic, what you talked about? I really wanted to say something about it, but I got lost. So so it was age and then something second between the age and airlines. What was it?
Accommodation and sponsorship.
Yes. Yeah, sponsorship. So when it comes to the age, I would say from my experience when I was researching this, this age limit is for the Erasmus Plus grant. You can find it in the program guide, and unfortunately, even though I would very much like to do that, I'm not in a position to change that. And also, I think that's problem with like the beta as such, because it's a youth project, it's youth kind of participation, empowerment, etc., etc. And I think that's how the EU classifies who is young and who is not. While I think this, the whole, that was something, I think you were the concept workshop last night, I believe, the first one of the day, 5, I think it started. And that's where they talked about how it should be inclusive, and people who are 35, they are, at least from what I've heard, full-blown professionals. They have the European values embedded in them, I would say. But if for example, my first MEU, I was, 18, 19, and it really showed me how well it can function. And from that moment, I fell in love. If you will keep increasing the age, of course, it will be more professional, but less exclusive. Because, the older you get, the less prone you are to participate in things where you have to go for a week. Maybe when you are older, you are just not allowed to go somewhere for a week because you are no longer a student. But that's not something, of course, I can change. The second one is airlines, what I wanted to mention, and that's as far as I know or heard from some people. We've been in contact with Rainer, but the agreement or the discussion is still ongoing, so we can't really comment on that. And something about the 60 points, again, it's program guide. And I think, yes, it might be easy to organize an MEU, but I believe that the Erasmus Plus is really strict in terms of how should your project look like. So I think if you're going to apply for the Erasmus Plus, you have to be really specific and you have to be really good in designing your project, which means that you can improve a lot. It's a challenge, of course, but again, it's Erasmus Plus, and it's not like beta, needs you to score 60 points. That's the eligibility for Erasmus Plus. So Christine as president, it's not going to say, well, I think you scored 55. You're not getting, you're not organizing an MEU. So, it's different conferences, different quality settings, if you will. But that's, I think, all I can say about it.
Did I understand well? Do you mean that this is regarding the Erasmus Plus or MEU? Because I think
no,
it's different. It's talking about the age. The age limit.
The age limit is for the Erasmus Plus grant, I believe for other grants as well. But at the same time, I think it's closely tied to how beta operates. But I might be wrong here.
So that means that not for the MEU simulations, the age limit.
No. I don't think so. But I think Kristen can comment on this.
Okay, I got you. Because a lot of participants and a lot of colleagues do not agree with that. So for example, those that are below the age of 20 years old, they say that it's like they didn't like the event, they didn't understand. It's difficult.
But I think it's the problem with the legal definition of youth, or how the EU defines youth, and it's a youth project basically. So I think you can't really do much here.
But psychologically, young people are aged between 18 and 35, not until 30. Because it's like you work on different simulations, you are organizing MEUs, you are doing a lot of things. So in beta, then when you get a little bit older, you don't have that opportunity to interact with people, to explain a lot of things. So I think that, Sorry, thank you so much.
Yeah, let's close this window and so maybe allow other people to participate. I'm sorry that we kept talking so long. So if you have any questions, please ask, shoot. Yes, Maria, please.
Thank you for the presentation. I really found it helpful. And I wanted to ask something really specific about Erasmus Plus. As far as I know, you're only allowed to apply once. Is that true, or can you apply again for the next deadline?
Well, at least from what I know, it's not really true. But as I said, like it's very, if you think this is a very specific question, there is a program guide and everything, like every single piece of information can be found there. But it's not true. You can apply multiple times for. It might be restricted in terms of years, but I don't think there is like you can apply only once, and if you get denied, then it's done. So yeah, as Kristen says, as many times as you want.
Yeah, usually the like if you fail with an application and E+, the NA, it will take a few months, but they will give you feedback eventually as like this was good, but this is lacking here. You are lacking like inclusion of people with few opportunities, things like this. So it's actually encouraged that you take this feedback, put it into the next grant, and try again. There's 4 deadlines in a year, I think. I hope I'm not promising too much. 3. Yeah, so technically you can apply for every single one, but of course, once you secure the funds, then you should first focus on implementing the project. I think that's the only thing I kind of missed in your presentation, Jakub. This was really great, but keep in mind that once you do get the funding, it's not over. That's when the actual work starts, because everything you promised in your application, you need to implement. You need to make sure you stick to the timetable. You need to make sure you actually fulfill all the criteria, that you offer all the things that you promised in the application, including the dissemination, including the impact report, or all of these kind of things. So really, it's it's an amazing opportunity to have this E+ funding, but it does come with a lot of responsibilities and obligations. So just be aware of that. That then not as soon as you are promised the money, the party is over. But that's when the work starts.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you. It mostly comes from my experience reading our national agency's call for proposals, and it basically said that you can't apply again. But yeah, it's good to know.
Well, thank you
Maybe
very much.
they just.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Jakub. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to mention that we should really kind of let other people ask questions, because we are kind of time constraint, if you will. And there is a next meeting at 12, or seminar workshop at 12, and I wouldn't want you to miss it because of this. So please, if someone else has questions, I can cater to that. But if not, then probably Anis can ask his question. We have 7 more minutes.
Yes,
Sorry, yes.
I do. I will keep
Sorry,
it brief.
I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. I don't want to be awkward.
Yeah, it's correct.
Shauna?
You pronounced it. Yeah, yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah, this is really awkward. I didn't mean you. So there was someone else speaking. I think it was Shauna. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yes, it's Joanna.
Sure, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I only wanted to ask if you can provide us with the template of the budget that you showed us in Excel, because it was quite nice and organized, and it's helpful.
Yes, I think we can do that. If you're going to organize an MEU, the Beta Europe think tank will provide you with that.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Or if there are no questions, we can cater one more question from Anis. If it's, of course, tied to financials or something we can do as an organization. Well, I see none, so Anis, please have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much again. So is it possible to use, for example, the power of supermarkets for catering and for conference materials? Because when I organized one of the conferences, for example, it's like we had sponsorship from supermarkets and it's like we got more than it was possible. Is it possible to ask them if they can provide catering, provide lot of food and products and everything that we need, because I think that they can cooperate to this issue. So this is just the question. Thank you.
Of course. I mean, there are no restrictions. You know, it's a private market. So if you feel like going to a supermarket and asking for either a donation or food, you know, feel free, as long as there can be certain quality. There is really no limitation. You know, whatever you dream of can come true in MEU. So whatever it is that you feel like is right, then you do it. But it's a perfectly legitimate question. Yes. So supermarkets are always an option. Does anybody else have a question? Otherwise, I think we can kind of say goodbyes. And also, Anis, you can, there is a partnership workshop organized as well, so you can attend that, and maybe they have more insights into this than I do. I think that's all. No, it's just awkward silence. So I think thank you very much for participating, and I hope you learned something new and which you can make use of in the following months, if it's possible to organize MEUs once again. And I encourage you to participate in other seminars, as I will do as well. So thank you very much, and I think I can close this session.
Thank you, Jakub.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a really nice day and a good rest of the symposium. We're looking forward to see you at the other workshops.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.